My husband said I was holding him back, so I left and his entire life collapsed and he came begging. The waiter had just poured our wine when my husband put his fork down. We were at our favorite restaurant, the one we visited every anniversary, every promotion, every we made it moment. His face was calm.
Too calm.
I've been thinking, he said, staring at his plate instead of me. You've become comfortable. I laughed once, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. I need someone who challenges me, he continued. Someone who pushes me forward. The words hit harder than any slap. I felt heat rise to my face as the room blurred. I was 62 years old, married for 36 years, and suddenly I was a problem to be solved. So I'm holding you back? I asked quietly. He didn't answer.
He didn't need to.
That silence was the moment my life cracked open. And if you're already feeling that punch in your chest, hit subscribe for more true revenge stories, because this is only the beginning. We walked home in silence after dinner. The streetlights felt brighter than usual, like they were watching me. He talked the whole way, filling the air with dreams that didn't include me. New projects, new partners, new energy. I just need space, he said, hands in his pockets. Time to focus. I nodded, even though my throat burned. I listened as he explained his future, like I was a stranger he'd met on the bus. Every sentence pushed me further out of the picture. That was when I realized something worse than him leaving. He wasn't just ending our marriage. He was rewriting the story. I was no longer the woman who supported him. I was the weight on his ankles. When we reached the house, he unlocked the door and walked in first. I stayed outside for a moment, staring at the doorframe I had painted myself years ago. I felt small, but something inside me was waking up. The next morning, he sat across from me at the kitchen table like he was doing me a favor. Coffee steamed between us. He spoke softly, carefully, like a man explaining bad news to a child. You've done nothing wrong, he said. I just outgrew us. My hands shook. You mean you outgrew me?
He didn't correct me.
He just sighed, like I was exhausting him. I don't want you to blame yourself, he added. You should find yourself again. Find myself. After decades of finding him first. My voice cracked when I asked, was I ever enough? He looked away. That was my answer. That moment hurt more than the dinner. More than the walk. Because it confirmed what I feared most. He had already left emotionally. I watched him stand up and rinse his mug, acting normal, while my world collapsed quietly behind my ribs. That was the day love turned into dismissal. I couldn't sleep that night. Memories kept pulling me backward, dragging me through the years. I remembered when he was broke and buried in grad school books. I worked double shifts. I paid rent. I typed his papers while he slept. I remembered sitting on the floor with stacks of envelopes, licking stamps for his first business proposal. My fingers were sore, but I smiled because I believed in him. When he failed, I held him. When he doubted himself, I reminded him who he was. When he succeeded, I stood in the background and clapped the loudest. I built his confidence brick by brick while setting mine aside. Now he called that comfortable. I sat up in bed, staring at the ceiling, and finally let the truth settle. He didn't rise alone. He rose on my back. And now that he could stand tall, he didn't need me anymore. That realization didn't break me.
It sharpened me.
He packed on a Friday afternoon. Boxes scraped the floor. Drawers opened and closed. The house sounded hollow, like it was holding its breath. He took the couch, the coffee maker, half the plates. He left behind dust and quiet. When he finished, he stood in front of me and rested his hand on my shoulder. I hated that touch. You'll be okay, he said gently. You just need to find yourself again. I nodded because I didn't trust my voice. He walked out with his suitcase, not looking back. The door clicked shut and the silence rushed in. I walked through the room slowly. Every corner held echoes of a life I thought was real. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table and cried until my chest hurt. But beneath the grief, something strange stirred. He thought he had left me behind. He didn't know he had just stepped out of my way. The phone calls slowed after he left. Friends I had hosted for years stopped checking in. Invitations faded. Smiles turned polite. I heard later what he'd told them. That I lost my ambition. That I got lazy. That I held him back. They believed him. It was easier. At gatherings I wasn't invited to, he played the brave man starting over. I became the sad wife who couldn't keep up. I scrolled through photos online and felt erased. 36 years reduced to a rumor. For weeks, I barely left the house. I replayed his words until they felt carved into my bones. Then one morning, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. My eyes looked tired, but they were still mine. I whispered, "He didn't leave me." I paused. "He freed me." That sentence scared me. And then it gave me strength. Grief still came in waves. Some nights, I barely slept. Some days, I blamed myself. I wondered if I should have been louder, sharper, more impressive. Then one quiet morning, I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee and asked myself a simple question. What did I give up for him? The answers came fast. My ideas. My plans. My confidence. I opened my laptop and signed up for a business course I delayed for years because it wasn't the right time. The instructor asked everyone to introduce themselves and share their goal. My voice shook, but I spoke. I want to become everything he thought I couldn't be. The words surprised me. They felt powerful. That day, I wasn't someone's wife. I was a woman starting again, not from nothing, but from experience. And I promised myself I would never shrink again. I worked quietly. I studied late. I took notes like my future depended on it because it did. I started small, helping women organize their businesses online. Just advice at first. Just guidance. But the messages kept coming. You helped me see clearly. I feel confident again.
So did I.
Each client gave me a piece of myself back. My hands stopped shaking.
My posture changed.
I cut my hair. I bought clothes that fit the woman I was becoming, not the one I used to be. My therapist smiled one day and said, "Healing isn't about forgetting. It's about reclaiming." That word stayed with me.
Reclaim.
I didn't know it yet, but I was building something bigger than a business. I was rebuilding power. And far away, my ex was still chasing freedom, unaware that the ground beneath him was already cracking. The work started to spread. One woman told another. Then another. I answered emails at dawn and finished calls after dinner. I worked from the same table where my marriage had fallen apart. I called it consulting, but really I was listening. I helped women untangle plans, fix pricing, and believe in themselves again. I understood them. I had lived small for too long. I charged little at first, then more. No one complained. They thanked me. For the first time in years, I felt useful in a way that belonged only to me. I named the project in my notebook before it had a logo.
Reclaim.
Because that's what I was doing, taking back pieces of myself I had handed over slowly, politely, without protest. At night, I slept deeper. My shoulders relaxed. Somewhere across town, my ex was starting over loudly. I was rebuilding quietly. And quiet growth is dangerous when people underestimate you. The changes showed on the outside next. I cut my hair short and sharp. I bought a jacket that made me stand taller. I stopped apologizing for speaking. My therapist noticed. "You're reclaiming space," she said. I liked that.
Space.
I made a routine. Morning walks. Healthy food. Long work blocks. I treated my life like it mattered. One afternoon, I caught my reflection in a store window and didn't look away. I smiled. Not because I was healed, but because I was healing. I still felt anger sometimes. It came in flashes. But I didn't drown in it. I used it. Each time I thought of his words, "You're holding me back," I worked harder. I wasn't trying to prove him wrong. I was proving myself right. That was the difference. And it changed everything. His life appeared online, like a magazine spread. Beaches.
Gyms.
Expensive dinners. A new woman by his side. Younger. Louder. Always smiling for the camera. He captioned one photo. New chapter. New energy. My chest tightened, but I didn't comment. I closed the app and went back to work. I knew better than to believe highlights. I had lived behind the scenes once. Still, I felt the sting. He was showing the world he had won. That leaving me had unlocked something better. That night, I wrote until midnight. I planned systems. I mapped growth. I didn't chase happiness. I built stability. The next morning, 3 new clients signed contracts. I whispered to myself, keep going. He was running fast. I was building deep. And deep roots don't show until the storm comes. The business grew faster than I expected. Clients doubled, then doubled again. I registered the company and printed business cards that felt unreal in my hands. Reclaim Co. The tagline came easily. Start from the ruins, rise from the fire. I hired help. I learned taxes. I asked questions without shame. Every step felt earned. One afternoon, my accountant laughed while reviewing my numbers. You know, she said, you're doing very well. I walked home floating. That night, I cooked for myself and ate slowly. No rushing. No guilt. I thought about the woman I had been, waiting, supporting, shrinking. She had done her best, but she wasn't needed anymore. I was becoming someone new. And somewhere, without knowing it, my ex's shadow was starting to shrink. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning. A local business magazine wanted to feature me. The headline read, "The woman helping entrepreneurs reinvent themselves." I read it 3 times. The interview was simple. They asked about setbacks, growth, and starting late. I told the truth. It's never too late, I said. You just need to stop waiting for permission. When the article came out, my phone didn't stop buzzing. Congratulations.
Pride. Surprise.
I stared at my name in print and felt something settle inside me. He had once said I lacked ambition. Now strangers were calling me inspiring. I smiled softly and whispered, fitting. I didn't send him the article. I didn't need to. The world was starting to notice me, and that was louder than any message. Invitations followed. Networking events. Panels. Dinners where people leaned in when I spoke. I met women who saw me clearly. Not as a wife. Not as a footnote. As a leader. We shared stories. We shared numbers. We shared hope. For the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. I stood in rooms without wondering if I belonged. I knew I did. One evening, a mentor said, "You've always had this. You just stepped aside for someone else." That truth hit hard. I went home and sat quietly, letting it sink in. I hadn't been weak. I had been loyal. But loyalty without respect is a cage. And I had finally unlocked the door. The text came late. "Heard about your company. Proud of you." That was all he wrote. I stared at the screen, feeling nothing. No anger. No joy. Just clarity. He wanted access. Validation. A thread back into my life. I didn't reply. Minutes passed. Then hours. Then days. Silence did what arguments never could. It deflated him. If you're still reading and feel this shift, subscribe for more true revenge stories, because the balance is about to flip completely. That message stayed unread, and his confidence began to crack. I went to bed smiling, knowing I had finally won something important. My peace. A year after he left, I earned more than we ever had together. My accountant showed me the numbers and shook her head. "You're holding no one back now," she joked. I laughed, real laughter. I paid off debts. I saved. I invested. I felt safe in my own hands. That night, I poured a glass of wine and sat by the window. The city lights looked different when you weren't afraid anymore. I thought of the woman he said was too comfortable. She had built an empire in silence. I didn't know it yet, but his world was starting to wobble. Rumors travel fast when success dries up. And soon, the same people who clapped for him would start to whisper. I took a slow sip and smiled. The storm was coming. And this time I was ready. The awards email arrived early one morning. I read it standing in my kitchen, barefoot, coffee growing cold in my hand. I had been nominated for Entrepreneur of the Year. The event would be hosted by the same firm where my ex once worked. The same place he used to brag about. The same building where I had once waited in the lobby, holding his coat, invisible. I sat down slowly. Fate had a strange sense of timing. I accepted the nomination without hesitation. Not because I needed validation, but because I deserved to take up space. That night, I stood in front of my closet and imagined the room. The lights. The faces. Somewhere inside that future crowd, I knew he would be watching. And for the first time, the thought didn't hurt. It felt balanced. Like a scale finally tipping the right way. The whispers started before the awards. A mutual contact mentioned his startup was struggling. Another said investors were restless. Someone else said he missed deadlines and overpromised again. I listened without comment. I knew his patterns. Big talk. Fast spending. Little patience. The woman he'd left me for still posted smiling photos, but fewer now. Less luxury. Less excitement. I focused on my own calendar instead. Client calls. Strategy meetings. Growth plans. Success didn't shout. It showed up every day and did the work. One evening, I passed the old office building where he used to work late. The lights were off. I didn't stop.
I didn't slow down.
I just kept driving forward, knowing that some stories collapse quietly before anyone notices. The breakup went public on a Sunday afternoon. His girlfriend posted a long message about misaligned values and lack of loyalty. She didn't name him, but everyone knew. Comments flooded in with sympathy for her. I watched the post once, then closed the app. I didn't feel joy. I felt confirmation. Ambition without grounding always eats itself. That night, my phone buzzed. A message from a friend. He's not doing well. I replied with a simple, I hope he finds his way. And I meant it, just not back to me. I slept deeply. The next morning, I signed 2 new contracts and approved an international partnership. While his world narrowed, mine widened. The distance between us was no longer emotional. It was structural. The awards committee emailed again. They had chosen me as the keynote speaker. I sat alone in my office at sunset, rereading the message while orange light filled the room.
Keynote.
My voice. My story. On his old stage. I thought about the dinner table. The fork. The words that cut me open. You're holding me back. I smiled, slow and steady. I didn't plan revenge. I planned truth. And truth, delivered at the right time, cuts deeper than anger ever could. I opened my laptop and began writing my speech. Not to attack. Not to accuse. But to stand tall where I had once shrunk. Outside, the sun dipped below the buildings. The calm before payback wrapped around me like armor. Awards night arrived dressed in sharp lines and flashing lights. I wore a tailored suit that fit me perfectly. Cameras clicked as I stepped onto the red carpet. I stood straight. I smiled calmly. Inside the ballroom, the air hummed with chatter and music. I scanned the room without searching, and then I saw him. He stood near the back, thinner, uncertain, holding a guest badge. He hadn't seen me yet. I felt no rush. No need to rush. This moment had waited long enough. I took my seat near the stage. People greeted me warmly, respectfully. When he finally noticed me, his face changed. Shock. Confusion. Something like regret. I met his eyes once, then looked away. The night had only just begun. He approached during the break, careful, like someone stepping onto thin ice. You look incredible, he said softly. I nodded once. Polite. Cold. Before he could say more, someone tapped my shoulder to congratulate me. Then another. Then another. He stood there, forgotten, watching the room orbit around me. I didn't gloat. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. The program resumed. My name was announced. Applause rose like a wave. As I walked toward the stage, I felt years fall off my shoulders. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about visibility.
Voice.
Presence. And he finally understood, too late, that he had never been ahead of me. He had only been standing in my way. Just before my speech, a familiar face leaned toward me. His former boss. The man who once ignored me in hallways. You know, he whispered, your ex used to say you were too timid for leadership. I smiled calmly. He was wrong about many things, I replied. The lights dimmed. The room quieted. I walked to the podium without shaking. Every step felt earned. I looked out at the audience, partners, leaders, investors. And somewhere among them, the man who once dismissed me. I placed my hands on the podium and took a breath. The silence waited. So did the truth. I began simply. A year ago, I said, someone told me I was holding them back. The room leaned in. They thought my presence limited their growth. Turns out, I paused. They were just standing in front of me. The applause thundered. People stood. Cameras flashed. I didn't look at him. I didn't need to. In that moment, I felt something close to peace, but sharper. More alive. When I stepped off the stage, my hands were steady. My heart was full. The damage was done. The balance had shifted. The next morning, clips from my speech flooded the internet. Someone had uploaded the full video overnight. By noon, it was everywhere. News sites, business pages, comment sections on platforms I never used. People shared it with captions like powerful and she said what we all needed to hear. Then the hashtag appeared. Hashtag holding her back. I didn't create it. I didn't push it. It rose on its own, fueled by women who recognized the words instantly. I watched quietly as strangers defended me, praised me,
Thanked me.
Meanwhile, his profiles went silent. Comments piled up beneath his old posts. Not cruel, just honest. How's that freedom? Looks like she was the engine. That night, my phone rang again. His name flashed on the screen. I let it ring. The revenge wasn't loud. It was unavoidable. Within weeks, his startup collapsed. Investors pulled out quietly one by one. The buzz dried up. The excitement moved on. He tried to spin it online, but no one listened anymore. The confidence was gone. I heard he'd started calling old contacts, asking for favors, pitching half-finished ideas. Then he started calling me, just to talk, just to explain, just to say sorry. I didn't answer. Every missed call was a boundary holding strong. I focused on work instead. Reclaim Co. expanded again. New hires. New markets. Stability layered on stability. One evening, my assistant said gently, he called again. I nodded. Archive it. I had already given him decades of access. He didn't get one more minute. He finally sent a message asking to meet for dinner. Said he needed closure. Said he wanted to apologize properly. Curiosity, not emotion, made me agree. He arrived early. He looked smaller. Older. The confidence that once filled rooms barely filled the chair. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, he said quickly, like he'd practiced. I listened calmly. I didn't see it then, he continued. I thought you were holding me back. I smiled, not kindly, not cruelly, just clearly. You should have realized that, I said, before you needed me. Silence settled between us. He reached for his glass with shaking hands. I stood first. Paid my bill. As I walked away, I felt nothing pull me back. That was how I knew it was over. The acquisition offer came 2 weeks later. One of my largest clients wanted to buy his failed company. They asked me to lead the transition. I didn't react right away. I read the details twice. If I accepted, I would oversee his remaining contracts, his performance, his future. I signed. The first meeting was scheduled for Monday morning. I arrived early, calm, prepared. When he walked into the room and saw me at the head of the table, his face drained of color. Welcome, I said evenly. This is Reclaim Co.'s acquisition meeting. He sat down slowly, eyes fixed on the table. Power had shifted fully now. Not through revenge, through consequence. The room felt heavy as I reviewed the agenda. My team listened closely. He didn't look up. I spoke professionally.
Clearly.
No emotion. We discussed missed targets, poor planning, inflated projections. Each point landed like a quiet weight. When I asked if he had questions, he shook his head. He wasn't angry. He was exposed. This was the man who once said I lacked ambition. Now, he couldn't meet my eyes. The meeting ended without drama. As people filed out, he stayed behind. I never thought it would be you, he whispered. I met his gaze for the first time that day. Neither did I said. That's what happens when you stop underestimating yourself. I walked out without looking back. The performance review followed standard procedure. I treated him like any other employee.
Fair. Firm. Honest.
Low productivity, I read aloud. Unstable leadership. Inflated ego impacting team morale. Each word came from documented reports. Not opinion. Evidence. Do you have anything to say? I asked. He stared at the table. Slowly shook his head. Didn't think so, I said calmly. I wasn't angry. I wasn't proud. I was finished. That was the moment I felt the final shift. I was no longer reacting to my past. I was directing my future. And he was no longer part of it. The termination email was brief, professional, final. I signed it with one sentence. Sometimes letting go means setting someone truly free. I didn't watch for his response. I didn't need to. My assistant closed the file. That evening, messages poured in. Support, respect, quiet admiration. I sat alone in my office as the sun dipped low. I thought of the woman at the dinner table, the one who thought she was the problem. She felt far away now. I stood up, turned off the lights, and went home, lighter than I'd been in years. The revenge wasn't about watching him fall. It was about standing tall where I once spent. Public support followed quickly. Articles, interviews, messages from women who saw themselves in my story. From left behind to boss, one headline read, "A TED Talk invitation arrived days later." I smiled when I read it. I hadn't chased revenge. I had chased truth. And truth had done the rest. Somewhere, I knew he was watching quietly, understanding too late. But my focus had moved forward. There was still more life to live, more meaning to build. And the final chapter, the one that mattered most, was still waiting. The TED stage felt quiet in a way that mattered. Bright lights, red circle, hundreds of faces waiting. I didn't think about him as I walked out. I thought about the woman I used to be. I was told I was holding someone back, I said into the microphone. But sometimes you need to drop dead weight to fly. The room stood. Applause rolled like thunder. Afterward, strangers hugged me. Women cried. Men nodded thoughtfully. I felt steady, grounded. That talk didn't change my life. It confirmed it. I went home that night and slept deeply. No replaying words. No regret. I had finally spoken without shrinking. And the world had listened. Reclaim Co. expanded faster than I planned. New offices opened. New leaders stepped in. I hired women who had been underestimated, overlooked, dismissed. We built systems. We built trust. We built futures. One afternoon, my banker smiled across the desk. "You're officially a self-made millionaire." I nodded calmly. Money didn't thrill me. Freedom did. I donated quietly. I invested wisely. I lived well, not loud. I walked through my office one evening and felt proud. Not because I won, but because I didn't become bitter. I became better. And that mattered more. An application crossed my desk from HR. A consulting role. The name looked unfamiliar. The resume wasn't. I recognized the writing style. The experience. The ambition, trimmed down now, smaller, careful. He had used a different name. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then, I typed one line. Application declined. I didn't feel cruel. I felt complete. Some doors don't reopen. Not because of revenge, but because the building has changed. At a charity gala, I met someone new. Kind eyes. Calm voice. No competition in him. "You don't intimidate me," he said easily. "You inspire me." I felt my chest soften for the first time in years. We talked slowly. Honestly. No rushing. No proving. I smiled more that night than I had in a long time. An email arrived late. Long, emotional. Apologetic. "I was wrong," it said. "I see it now." I read it once. Then forwarded it to my assistant with one word. Archive. "Some lessons don't need answers," a journalist asked. What would you say to the man who said you were holding him back? I laughed softly. I'd say thank you, I replied. I needed the push. The truth felt light. At the Reclaim Gala, I launched my foundation, helping women restart after toxic relationships. The slogan hung behind me, "Let them underestimate you. It's the sweetest revenge." The room glowed with strength. One morning, I passed a small cafe. He sat inside, working quietly on a laptop unnoticed. I walked by, without slowing. He once said I held him back. Turns out, I was the only thing holding him up. If you love this revenge story and want more just like it, make sure you're subscribed. There are plenty more to tell.